Good morning, everyone. Are you excited to learn about school finances, right?
Yes.
Exactly. So thank you for being here. I know as new principals, there's a lot on your plates. And one of those things is your school finance, being your board budget and your school-generated funds. This morning, we'll focus specifically on your board budget, and in the next session in December, we'll dive into the school-generated funds. Show of hands if you've already attended a lead session on finances, or if this is your first time. So a few experience, good. And it is a good refresher as well too. So while it might be new to some of you, it's a good refresher, and we'll try to keep it a little bit light. As we mentioned, finances can be a bit heavy. So why really are we here? As you can imagine, in today's environment, there is increased focus on accountability and transparency. So what does that mean, accountability? Really just means, are you spending money in accordance with ministry guidelines and board policies? And really, transparency is just being able to answer questions, right? So are you familiar with your financial reports? Can you read them? Can you communicate to your school community about them? Can you answer questions to the external auditors, internal auditors, or even the media, right? So that's what it comes down to, and that's what we'd like to help you with today. In sort of this environment of increased scrutiny, you're not alone, right? So you have a few resources and tools, and these resources and tools are here to help you on a day-to-day basis. And one of those resources is your school finance support officers, or your FSOs. We're here to support not only superintendents, but yourselves, principals. And what we do is basically help you to navigate those policies I mentioned, so the board policies and the ministry guidelines. So we help in interpreting them if you have questions. We develop tools to ensure that there are appropriate controls in the school. And in addition, we support if there are external audits, or if you have an internal audit where there might be a significant finding. So quick show of hands if you've had a recent external or internal audit. A couple in the room, yes. And as you can imagine, again, those auditors are always looking with a sort of fine-tooth comb at your finances. What we're trying to do as a team here, right, so yourselves and your finance support officers, is to help mitigate some of those risks, including the reputational risk to your school and to the board, and ensure that you're in compliance with all the policies and, you know, those boring procedures and so on, right? So we're here for you, really. Okay? So today we have Jenny from the Mississauga field office, and we have Julian Arena from Northfield office. In the December session, you'll have a chance to meet Christine and Sahar. Okay? So please, during the break, take some time to, if you haven't met them yet, introduce yourselves and so on, and we'll come around, we'll try to meet you all. In addition to that, we'll also schedule visits with all the new principals in the upcoming weeks. And we'll also schedule visits with secondary schools in the spring. And if, for whatever reason, if you have already met your FSO but you'd like a follow-up visit, please reach out to us. We're here for you. Okay, so without further ado, I'll pass you on to Jenny, who will start to dive into board budget.
Good morning. Is that working now? All right. Okay, so I'm Jenny Purkowski. I'm one of the FSOs of the Mississauga office. And really, I'm going to start off by helping you understand your board budget. And we're going to try to help you by providing you information on where your board budget is coming from, what's included in your board budget, how to spend your board budget, and ultimately how to manage the board budget. So all these different pieces will be covered, and if you have questions, please feel free to ask away. So the first piece we'll cover is, where does all this money come from that you have at your disposal? Well, the sources of funds are twofold. As Noreen mentioned, you've got your school-generated funds, which are mainly student fees and fundraising, which will be covered in another session in December. Today, we're going to focus on the provincial funding. And that really starts with your taxes. So when you pay your taxes, you have to select, if you're a homeowner, a board to fund for the education. Then the Ministry of Education will allocate to all the different boards across Ontario, and all of that is then allocated down to the schools from the board. Once it hits your school, it's up to the principals to then decide what the best way to spend those funds are. And all of that will fall under your responsibility. So, where does the provincial funding, or how does the provincial funding get down to the school level? Well, you're going to end up having an original budget, and that original budget will be based on enrollment planning that was done the year before. So the board will receive its money, then the board will then allocate down to the schools based on enrollment. However, we know that that enrollment number will change. So for elementary schools, you're going to have an adjustment once a year. For secondary schools, that happens twice a year. So it'll happen for elementaries in February based on January numbers. And then for the secondary schools per semester, you'll have it in November and April, and that'll be based on October and March numbers. But schools also get other funding from the ministry. They can get other grants that are coming through, such as outdoor ed, or there could be board funding that's provided, such as the computer plan budget, or a repairs budget, or any other grants that may be coming down to the school level. All of these amounts are still at your discretion to spend based on the policies, based on what the funds are supposed to be spent on. So, where can you see all of this, and how does it come through your reports? So really, your board budget is in FIS. FIS is the system that maintains and tracks your spending and your budgets. So what you'll have to do is you'll use your administrative summary report, and in that report, you'll go through and see the different sections. So the first section that you would see in your administrative summary report will be lunchroom supervision, and that will include salaries and benefits. That's all that's in there. The next category is the biggest category that you have, and it's the biggest component of your budget. That's the instructional supplies budget, which we sometimes call, or most of the time call, consumables. And that's really for supporting the school and ensuring that you can provide the support for curricular as well as extracurricular activities. In there, you'll spend for workbooks, commencement venues, anything that needs to be spent for the school. Guys, have any questions so far as to what would go into your instructional supplies budget? You're all familiar with where all that spending is? All right. So the next piece you'll see is the computer plan. The computer plan is really just for the instructional hardware. It's not for administrative hardware, and it's not for software. Software will be included in your consumables budget. Other grants, that category will include funding from the ministry, which is the outdoor ed that each school was allocated at the beginning of the year, along with a memo that explained how the funding should be spent. There's also parent engagement that are funds available to the school. And there may be other funding that comes in throughout the year. In addition, the board also provides funding for extracurricular activities. So now you've got your budget and you need to figure out how to spend it. In this case, what I'm referring to is how are you going to process payments in the system so that all your expenses get recorded. And in this case, all our purchases are to go through approved vendors. And your purchases, if you cannot find an approved vendor, you should speak to purchasing in order to see maybe they already have or are working with a supplier for what you're looking for. The ways of paying for your expenses depends on the value, depends on what you're purchasing. And the 4 methods that we have available are purchase orders, invoice entry, P-cards, and petty cash. All of these are valid methods of payment for all your expenses at the school. So, purchase orders. For purchase orders, those are mandatory for anything that's greater than $4,000. But in addition, there's a couple of exceptions. Computer hardware, if it's greater than $200, has to go through a purchase requisition as well. And if it's an Apple purchase, that also requires a purchase requisition. So if it's a purchase order that you're going to be using, all expenses should be pre-approved by yourselves. So you go out and you want to order something at the school level, you will place a requisition. That requisition will then flow through purchasing, and purchasing will actually place the order on your behalf. What you do afterwards is once you receive the goods, you enter that information into the system, the invoice is received, and accounting will pay for it. In this case, all 4 areas are involved: the school, purchasing, the vendor, and accounting. Our next method of payment will be invoice entry. And in this case, what happens is the purchasing department is not involved. So the invoices come in, while the purchases are made, invoices are processed, they would go directly from the school to accounting. And in order to have accounting pay for it, it would go through invoice entry. At the school level, your OM or your OAB will enter the invoice information into FIS. They will provide you with an invoice edit list that you have to approve and ensure the appropriate backup is there. So you're approving all your expenses prior to sending the information to accounting to pay the invoice. Then we have our P-cards. P-cards are also available to all the schools, and there's 4 types of P-cards. We have the regular plastic cards, and in that case you've got a principal P-card, which is just yours, and you've got shared P-cards for an authorized list of users. However, there's also ghost P-cards, and those are really just a string of numbers and are used mainly for online purchases. And they're ghost cards that have 2 purposes. There's the regular one, and there's also a textbook P-card, ghost card. And the reason there's a guest books P-card is because the board is entitled to GST rebates on textbooks, and in order to capture all that information and be able to claim our rebates, this is how the information is captured. So it's very important that your textbooks are ordered through the ghost P-card. The actual controls and management of the P-cards we're going to cover later on. And the last method is petty cash. So petty cash is a float that each school has in a separate bank account for small purchases that are under $200. And these purchases are checks that are written and replenished by the board back into your bank account. So any checks that are issued through the petty cash account are then requested for reimbursement from the board. However, the same process has to be in place: approved vendors, approved receipts, valid receipts. So, I don't know if you're paying attention, but what if you have someone who comes to see you and they want to buy textbooks. What are you going to use? Perfect. So it's the P card, and it's the Ghost textbook P card. What if you've got supplies that are, let's say, $150? What would you use to pay that? You've got two options. Petty cash or P cards. That's right. So both of those options are available to you for such purposes. However, if it's an invoice of $500, petty cash is no longer an option. At this point, it's invoice entry or a P card. All right? So, in summary, you've got board vendors for all purchases. Where there are no board vendors, contact purchasing. They may have a vendor that they are in the process of signing up or have already sourced it for someone else. It's always recommended that you contact purchasing. And for board purchases, under 200 is P card or petty cash. 200 to 4,000 is P card, invoice entry, or purchase order. And over $4,000, it has to be through a purchase order. So that's how you get your expenses into FIS, so that you can see what kind of spending has been happening at the school. In order to sign off or approve expenses, we've got authorized signing lists for each school. And at the beginning of the school year, you ensure that it's up to date. And should anything change throughout the year, you have to update your signature list. And this signature list will cover such things as petty cash replenishments. It could also cover your journal entries, your budget transfers, as well as check requisitions that you may have. Then you've got an authorized P card user list. And in this case, it should also be reviewed, and as things change, it has to be updated, because this is the list where you keep a tally of who's allowed to sign out your P cards. Then the last list is the check signing, and that's with the banks. So every check has to have two signatures, and really the signature, one of those signatures has to be a principal or vice principal as an administrator. We saw during the work to rule where OMs and OABs were not signing checks that if you only have one signatory, it's difficult to get a check signed. So it's recommended that you have two administrators in certain circumstances. Yes.
Question for single administrators.
Yeah.
How does that work if, for example, in this last work to rule issue, single administrators were then having to deal with that issue of only having one signatory? What do you recommend?
I'll let Noreen.
Yeah, so during the work to rule, I think the recommendation from the system was to hold payments. But in scenarios where there is an option to have a vice principal, yeah, we recommend having that vice principal being an authorized signature.
We don't have one.
Worst case scenario, if we get to a point where it was drawn out and so on, maybe we can look into getting a superintendent. But again, you'd have to look at that superintendent taking on, each school and their family and sort of being able to sign off. Again, that is a sort of worst case scenario. We won't go down that road necessarily, but if possible, having a second vice principal, if you do have one, being an authorized signature is the recommendation. Unfortunately, to your point, some cases it's not possible.
Thank you.
Yes.
I read somewhere, and maybe I'm wrong, that in terms of, and I understand that we need to have a second, but I thought it was we shouldn't have to have signing authority on one check, both vice principal and principal.
Okay, yeah, because
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, like, I think the whole idea is a balance, right? The control, an administrator and then an office manager. But it's not recommended to have 2 office staff signing or 2 administrators signing, right? So it should be a combination of 2.
Yeah, and I mean, those are best practices, right?
Yes, those are best practices.
Good question. Any others? Yes.
My question's not so much about signatures, but just around board-approved vendors.
Yep.
So my question is around if you're having a speaker or somebody come in to work with your school, you generally still have to go to, they have to be approved by the board. And then it still follows the same process of going through, obviously it does, but my question is how do we generally pay speakers?
There
so
is-
that they get their money in a fairly short order?
Yeah, I think there is an honorarium. I think if we're thinking about speakers, there is an honorarium type form, and definitely you can take that away and then provide you that form if you can't find it in the system. It's but that's the process generally for
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah, so yeah, just to wrap up the sort of authorized signature list. I mean, if you have for any circumstances, you're going off, maybe taking a bit of a leave if possible, and you have an acting principal coming in. If we can get the acting principal set up with authorized signatory powers at the bank and so on before you take that leave, or and again, we saw these challenges in circumstances where there was an audit recently, and there was a new OM at the school, so that person didn't have authorized signatory powers, and there was an acting principal. So in that case, there was no one at the school with the power to sign checks or to sign off on forms for the audit, right? So again, just mitigating that risk is, of course, always having at least two signatures, and where possible, having that third set up. Okay.
For the spending approvals, it's always one level above. So in the case of school staff, it'll be the principal approving the expenses. Should it be the principal's expenses, it will have to be the superintendent. And that includes petty cash, P-card, as well as the school-generated funds. So all of your expenses have to go through the superintendent. So we've covered where the board budget comes from. We've covered what funding you receive through the board budget. We've covered how you can spend it through FIS. Now it's a matter of how do you manage that board budget? What do you do? And hopefully we can answer a lot of your questions in that case. So it's the beginning of the school year. You've got all this money that came in. How are you going to spend it? Any suggestions? I think you've all been through it, so what kind of ideas do you have? What are you going to look at to figure out where all this money should go? There's a few hands. All right.
I did an inventory and then consulted with staff, because as a principal new to the building, I didn't know what we had and what was working and what wasn't.
Great. That table had a few hands there.
Past budgets.
Yeah. Review your reports from prior year. Take a look at what's happened, what their budget was, what they actually spent. Yep.
New to the school, I called you Rena. I had her come in right away, and I think, what, was that one of your first meetings or something like that? Yeah. And I had 2 or 3 years worth of the template that the other 2 principals had used previously, and so I just decided for this year to piggyback right on that and keep it consistent.
Yeah.
And then Urena just kind of was at the end of the phone line regularly for me as I got, call before you dig.
we're here to assist you if you need us to come in and do something like that with you. I know I've done that with a couple of my schools as well, where they wanted the new year's starting and they wanted to understand what they were starting the year with, what we were left with from prior year as well. So really the big thing to do is to plan. A plan is the best beginning. So the plans, you're not going to know everything, so consult with staff. Review last year's report, review the FIS reports. You might consider holding some money back, and that would be because you don't know what the adjustment will be for your enrollment. Enrollment may have gone down, and therefore you need to hold back some money. You may want to hold back some money for unexpected expenses that come up. Regular life, that happens all the time. You don't expect the car to break down, but you need to fix it. So it's a good, I guess, method to consider holding back some money for that. And really to manage all your expenses, well, you'll be approving all your expenses, approving the purchases prior to activities taking place, so you have an idea of where you're spending your money. In order to see against your budget where that money is, you need to review your FIS reports. And we've created a principles checklist, which I'll go over in a few minutes. And really that's sort of a guideline or assistance for you to see what you should be looking at on a monthly basis to help you understand where you're at with your budget. At the beginning of the year, you want to see that it's allocated properly. Partway through the year, you want to see, have you reached the spending that you expected? And towards the end of the year, to ensure that what you needed to accomplish has been accomplished in that school year. And all the spending is based on board policies, and you have to adhere to these policies. Another way to manage your budget would be to have budget meetings, whether that be with us as FSOs or with your staff one-on-one, or perhaps maybe it's individually with departments to understand where they're at, what they were planning to do during the year, have things happened as planned. I know a lot of activities may have been, delayed based on the work to rules, so that may come into play. So the principles checklist. So really this was developed to help you manage your funds, and it's broken down into different pieces as to what you should look at on a monthly basis, and each one has a purpose. Today we're going to cover the first one. So what you need to do for the board budget, which is in FIS, and those are the reports that we're going to review, you need to see the administrative summary. That will give you the picture of where your budget is at, and it'll let you know where you land. Once you're looking at that report, there's 3 other reports that we say as needed. And really for those 3 reports, it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking at your administrative summary report and you've received an adjustment for the enrollment, you want to go to the budget transfer report and you'll be able to see what adjustment was put through your budget at the board level. If for some reason you feel that purchases, the commitments on your report are a little higher than you expected, or maybe there's commitments there that you thought were already filled and the goods were received, but they're still showing on your purchases as commitments. Or maybe there's something there that really you didn't know was coming, and maybe it was for another school. So really, those are the the budget transfer year-to-date report is really the detailed report that will tell you what has gone through the different accounts, and that will give you the detail if you want to know what makes up the actual spending that's happened in your school. So those are the reports that we recommend you take a look at. Definitely look at the administrative summary on a monthly basis. If you have additional questions, the other 3 reports are there to help you. If you'd like more assistance, you can always give us a call and we'll try to help you. We're putting you at a different school. So you are the principal at 123 Sunrise. And what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to look in your folders. You've got an activity. You're going to find a copy of a budget transfer report. And you're also going to find a copy of the administrative summary report. What we're going to ask you to do, and the administrative summary report, I think you're all familiar with, but that's the one that will give you a summary of what's been budgeted and spent at the school. These are some basic questions that you all probably have been asked or looked at, or perhaps would like us to explain. So, what was last year's rollover amount, and what does that mean? What's the relationship between the budget transfer report and the administrative summary report? What does this school currently have available for rollover? So the first one is how much came into your budget from the prior year? And this question, the third one, is what do you have available to move into the next year? The fourth one is what's Department 999? And then what does the balance in the school's 859 account mean? Now, all of these reports are available for each school, but in this case, we've printed it out for the school here for you to review. And if you take a few minutes to take a look at answering these questions, maybe about what, 10 minutes? 15 minutes?
Yeah, or less.
Or less. And then we'll take it up again.
All right, so let's take it up together. So I want to kind of back up a little bit to the checklist that Jenny was mentioning. We've updated the checklist. So in your packet, you will see a resources section on the left-hand side of the packet, and that's kind of where we've put in some information that we feel will be beneficial to you. So the updated checklist is there. And as Jenny was mentioning, some of those reports we've added as needed because we recognize that, you know, you're busy as administrators at the school. You don't want like a pile of reports coming to you every month. So we kind of just focus on certain ones like the admin summary report, and we say look at that one, and then anything else like the budget transaction report and so on, you can look at that as needed, right? So those 4 reports on the checklist are what concerns the FIS budget, and then you can kind of look at other reports other than the admin summary report as needed. Okay, so to the activity. The scenario is that you are the principal at Sunrise Public School. You've been given 2 reports, the budget transfer report and the admin summary report for the school year. So has everybody seen these 2 reports for your school? Has anybody not seen them? You can talk back at me, that's fine. So everybody has seen the reports. Now it's a different question whether you understand the reports or not, but the office manager at this point should be giving you certain reports on a monthly basis so that you kind of have an idea that these are the reports that you should be looking at, right? So these 2 reports we've attached to the activity, and we are asking the following questions. What was last year's rollover amount and what does it mean? What is the relationship between the 2 reports? Is there a relationship? We don't know until we look at it. What does the school currently have available for rollover? Is it the same question as what was rolled over? Maybe it's a different question, right? What is Department 999 and what does the balance in the 859 account mean? So what we're gonna do is we are going to review the reports and at the same time trying to answer the questions, right? While we kind of go over the reports itself. All right, so the budget transfer report is an overview of all the budgets that have been downloaded to your school from the board office. Okay, so Jenny was mentioning the lunchroom supervision. She mentioned the computer plan. She mentioned special grants, other monies that come in from within the board or external from the ministry. All of those pieces you will find on the budget transfer report. It's a summary, it's an overview of all the money that has come in. Instructional supplies budget is one of them, which is, as she mentioned, the biggest piece of your board budget. So that comes in at the beginning of the school year. In September, of course, because you needed to be able to plan, to be able to make purchases for instruction and so on. And it's based on planning from the previous year. Now, all of the budgets have what we call a Peel class. So if you're looking at this report, if you see 005, it concerns your instructional supplies budget. All right, so the question, let's go to the question that we were asking, which is what was the rollover amount? So do we know what that number is from looking at this report? 8,000, right? Does everybody see that? Okay, so that is how you will find out what your rollover amount is. And this is the amount of unspent funds from last year that you can roll forward into the current year budget. So in this case, we see that the rollover was $8,000. Well, what does that mean? So this is an elementary school. We have rolled over $8,000, but what is that telling us? So as a new principal, you come into the school, it's November, you've seen $8,000 of rolled over funds. Now, remember, for elementary schools, the limit is $8,000. You're only allowed to roll forward $8,000 of unspent money, or $16,000 for a secondary school. So if you see $8,000, are you happy with this number?
Yes.
Should you be slightly sad? You should be, right? It's extra money. But is it saying something about how we, yeah?
I'm wondering if, like, when I look at that number, then I have to kind of think in my mind, that's how much I should be looking to hold back for this year, from this year.
Okay, so you could use the rollover amount as a holdback for this year, that's fine. But the number 8,000, if we're saying that, okay.
Well, you just didn't spend the money that you had last year.
Right? That's half of the answer.
Are we supposed to spend that money for the kids we have that year? So if I'm rolling over $8,000, that's a lot of money that I can spend.
Yes, right? So what you're saying and what you're saying is exactly the right answer.
Because it's exactly 8,000, we don't really know how much more we didn't spend.
Aha, so this is taking it one level further, right? If we're saying that $8,000 is the limit, what are the odds that you planned exactly to have 8,000? It's more likely that you had more, and so you rolled over 8,000 and then you lost money, right? So this may make you happy as a new principal, but really you should be looking at what happened last year. How much money did we lose? Because as you said, the money that we have is supposed to be spent on the students for that year, right? And so if we're losing money, that's not a good sign, right? So this is something that as a new principal, you want to kind of look at. Jenny was talking about planning. You want to look at what went on last year. What is it that we did or didn't do? Like, how come that we lost money, right? Is it that we didn't plan enough? We thought we had put through some purchases that didn't make it into the budget. What happened, right? So that we're not in that position where we're losing money from rollover.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So you said all the Peel class that is 005, that's all instructional?
Instruction.
Consumables.
Yes, that's right. Because we'll see later when we go to the admin summary report how the information is then in sections. It's easier to read when you're in the admin summary report. It kind of sections it off into the class of expense that it is, right? So instructional supplies will be 005, which is your consumables. But there's other classes. Jenny talked about lunchroom supervision. She talked about computer plan. And so that becomes more apparent as you look at the admin summary report. Okay? So 005 is always talking about your consumable budget, your instructional supplies. Okay. All right, so then if you have an adjustment, whether it's up or down, based on last year's planning, maybe you have more students and then the board kind of gives you more money based on the enrollment, you will find more money here under the budget enrollment adjustment, or maybe you lost students. In this case, that's what happened here. So there is a clawback of $2,000, $2,300. Okay. All right, so the second question is, what is the relationship between the two reports, the budget transfer report and the administrative summary report? Who thinks there is no relationship? Two completely different reports, unconnected. Who thinks there is a relationship? Right? Who knows what that relationship is? Yeah, right? So the short answer is that both reports have budget information that contain the exact same amount for the budget. Okay? So as I said, the budget transfer report is just kind of, downloading different budgets and just telling you what the budget is. And at the end of the day, you have a total amount of $120,000. Okay? And the administrative summary report kind of takes it a step further. It not only talks about the budget, it does include the budget, and that budget number is the same as $120,000, but then it adds more information, right? So it has commitments, which we'll see are purchase orders. It has the actual expenditure. How much have you actually spent of your budget? That you will find on the administrative summary report, which is not information that you can find on this report, right? So is that clear? No?
It also has additional information, correct? That the budget one does not have.
Yes, so the admin summary report
Right. Okay.
has more information, but when so there's three reports, right? We have the budget transfer report, which is like the overview. Then we have the admin summary report, which takes it a step further. It has the budget information, but it also has information about your spending. How much have you spent, and how much do you have available? Then we have a third report, which is the budget transaction report that goes into the specific transactions in a department, right? So it shows you at the transaction level what has been recorded in your budget. So those are the three reports. But to this specific question, the relationship is that the two have the budget amounts that are the same, okay? So the two always have to tie together. All right, so here we have the budget transfer report. We can see that the total is $120,000. And then we look at our administrative summary report, we see that the total as well is $120,000 for the budget. Does everybody see that? Is anybody not seeing that? Okay. So that is the relationship. So now we know we're looking at the same budget, but this is really, the admin summary report is the one that, if you notice on the checklist, which is part of the resources in the folder that we gave you, it doesn't have as needed beside it, because this is one that we want you to look at every month, right? All the other ones, you can maybe skip a month, budget transfer report, budget transaction, but the admin summary is something that you should be looking at least once a month, because you want to know where you are with your spending, and that's where you'll find the information. Okay. So this is the administrative summary report. It has the same budget information, and this is the budget that has been downloaded, the same information as the budget transfer report. But as I mentioned, it then goes into the different classes, right? So Joanne, you were asking about the supplies and services. This is it. It's always Peel class 005. Okay? But when we talk about other pieces of this report, we have the salaries and wages at the top, or employee benefits. That's the lunchroom supervision for the salaries and wages, and so on. So it kind of sections it into bits that are easier to digest and understand. All right, commitments is talking about purchase orders. Okay, so when you look at commitments, it's referring to purchase orders. And Jenny told us that if we want to make a purchase that's over $4,000, we need to raise a purchase order. And once we raise the purchase order, this is where you will find it. It will show up under the commitments column in your admin summary report. So in this case, we have raised the purchase order in our department 010, the school success department. If we then want more information, maybe you're looking at this report and it's not ringing a bell what purchase order this is, you can ask your office staff to run you a detail of the purchase order report so that you know exactly what this thing is, okay? Actual is the spending that you've done out of your budget. These are expenses that have been processed through your budget by invoice entry, by P-card, by petty cash. Those are the expenses that have been booked and deducted from the original budget. And then the available is just the simple math of budget minus the purchase orders minus the actual expenses will give you what's available. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
So where it says under the lunchroom supervisor salaries and wages,
Mhm.
and it says negative 947.
Yes. They've overspent. That's what that means.
So that's possible to go into a negative in that area.
It is possible. However, so I think the board office has given each school kind of a brace amount of $250, okay, over what you're allowed. So up to $250, you won't be penalized. If you go beyond that, then the additional overspending is deducted from your supplies and services at rollover. So if this were at year end and you are at $947, they're gonna say, okay, we allow you up to 250 and whatever that number is. So 947 minus 250, say it's $700. The 700 they're going to take from your supplies and services. So that will reduce your rollover amount by 250.
So at the end of the year, could you actually, like, not just like if you've got overages in overspending in every area, you could actually end the year in the hole? Like have your.
So the only part of the budget that rolls over is the supplies and services, right? In terms of unspent funds. But that's kind of like the simple statement, because if you've gone over in other areas, whether it's your computer plan or your lunchroom supervision, right? They will take that into account with whatever monies that you have available. They will deduct it. So if you've gone over in your lunchroom supervision, you've gone over in your computer plan, whatever overage there is, they will deduct it from whatever money you have available in your supplies and services.
And just to add to that, we've seen examples of schools where they started the year with a negative rollover amount because they really overspent.
That's right. Yes. So in terms of rollover, the supplies and services is really the only piece of the budget that rolls over. And really the instructional supplies piece of your budget is the section of your budget that you have complete control over, right? In terms of how you allocate within the school departments, the amounts. So you can, on September 1st, you've done your planning, you've determined, you've looked at prior year reports, you've talked to staff, you've done your due diligence, and then you decide, you know what, grade 1, I want to give you $1,000. Grade 2, I want to give you $2,000. That is completely at your discretion. Even including the names of the departments, right? If you don't like the names of the departments, you can change them. Just because, you came into the school and, you have all these names there, if it's not working for you in terms of how you want to manage the budget, you can change the names and do that through the budget department. You can request to change or to delete departments within your 005. What we ask though is that you not make it the name of a teacher, right? Because I think this was prior practice where we say, department 001 is Mrs. Smith. But then Mrs. Smith moves to a different school and then we're kind of like trying to update departments all the time, right? So you kind of make it manageable and general enough that it makes sense for your school. All right, so our next question in the activity is, what is Department 999? Does anybody know?
Isn't the amount that was given for overtime for our office staff to enter the plan of care?
Department 999?
Yeah. Well, the amount.
So,
Okay, so we looked at, so we went back to the budget transfer, and we saw that it was under medical condition, PPM 161.
Right.
And so that amount, we think, is the amount that was given to cover our office staff if they are taking overtime to enter that. Is that what that is?
yeah, that could be. I'm not exactly sure what it was from last year. But I think what I'm trying to focus on is the department.
Oh, budget
So
variance.
what is the department? What is Department 999? Any volunteers? No answer is crazy, by the way. All right, I'll tell you. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Is that where you get your GST back and is that?
No.
How you get HST back or?
No. No. No, because in terms of FI, maybe you're thinking school-generated funds, but for board budget, the HST is calculated as soon as it's entered into the system. So there is no department that's kind of housing HST, right? Okay, let me tell you, make this easy. So Department 999, as we notice, it's within the 005 section, right? So it's within your instructional supplies. And what this department is, it's a placeholder that the board has created for your initial instructional supplies budget download, as well as any subsequent adjustments to that budget. So, okay. All right, so at the beginning of the year, you come to the school on day one, all your instructional supplies budget, in this case is $55,000, right? That's what we're seeing from this report. Supplies and services has $55,000. That entire amount will be in Department 999.
Oh, right, and then they just.
Ooh, it's coming alive now, right? All right, so it's in that department, and then you will split it. Is it sounding familiar?
Wherever you want it.
So you will then, based on your own planning, say, okay, this total amount, I want to split it like so. And you tell your office staff, this is my decision, and they will take the numbers and feed it into the system so that it breaks it out how you want it within the department. So that's what I mean by a placeholder, is that initially the board will put all of your supplies and services into this department. Now, any subsequent adjustments, whether it's up or down, so we saw the medical condition, it's in 005, any other adjustments or even the budget enrollment adjustment of minus 2,300, that will all appear in this department. So that's the answer, and ideally this department should be zero. Why should it be zero? Because it's a placeholder. We can't spend from this department. So as you are doing your review, you should look at Department 999. If there's a number there, the way to find out what that amount is to look at your budget transfer report to see what it is, right? So Joanne is absolutely right that when she looked at this, she kind of traced that number to the budget transfer report and saw that it was a medical condition amount that came from the board, okay? And because it's 005, that 340, does everybody see the medical condition amount on the budget transfer report?
Yes.
Okay. Yes? Okay.
So when we talk about holding money back for February or January, whenever it happens, there should always be a number in that that placeholder?
When I say placeholder, I don't mean it that the school should be using Department 999 as a placeholder. Like you can do your placeholding in a different department within the school. Like you can do it in your general or your principal's account. I think what we mean by this is just a place that the board uses to download money to the school, right? So ideally, this department should be at 0 all the time. So if you see a number there, whether it's positive or negative, first you want to find out what that number is. What is this adjustment? Why am I getting money, or why are they taking money away? And the answer is always on the budget transfer report. Once you're clear, then you can tell the office staff, okay, I want this amount to be moved into this department, right, to clear it, and then they will do it in their own system, okay? Is this helping anybody so far? Okay, good. All right, so that's the answer. It's a placeholder. It should be 0. All right, so the next question is, what does this school currently have available for rollover? So it's, what did you say? 5,366. Okay, so does everybody agree with that? 5,366, or does anybody have a different answer?
I think at the next page, it says the final amount is actually $4,398.70.
On the next page?
Yeah, on page 3.
Page 3 of 4.
There's
Says
more-
report and final total.
4398. Wrong? It's still part of the administrative summary report, and it just says report final total. So it has the budget, the commitment, the actual.
Okay, so you're looking at the total budget of 120,000?
Yeah.
But remember, we're talking rollover. So rollover only applies to 005. Remember we said that? So 005 is the only place that we should be looking at for rollover. So in this case, what does the school currently have available for rollover? So let's say this is June. This is the end of the year, and you want to know, how am I doing? Like, have I overspent? What are the concerns I should have? And you're looking at this report, what number will you focus on? If you look at 5,366, will that number make you happy? Is that the right number?
It's less than the 8,000, but you gotta make sure that you're committed, it's gonna be received, so that money stays there, which is always the game as you're trying to balance.
I like the way you're thinking. I like that. So the answer is not $5,000. It's not $5,366, because when we talk about rollover, we are only talking about your actual expenses. Now remember, your commitments are not an actual expense yet. It's just an intention to buy something, right? So at this point, you're wanting to buy something. You haven't paid for it yet. You haven't received it yet. So it's not an actual expense. So for rollover purposes, we will only be looking at the budget minus the actual to see exactly how much dollars are available. And whatever that amount is will then be subject to the $8,000 or $16,000 limit. So in this case, the raw math is $55,000 minus the actual of $45,000, we have $9,600. So if you were thinking you have $5,000, which is under the $8,000, that would not be the right thinking, right? So in reality, you have almost $10,000, so $9,600, and it's going to be subject to the $8,000 limit. So you will end up losing $1,600. Who was confused by this math?
Do that again.
Is it clear? Okay.
Do it again.
Gladly.
Okay.
All right, so at the end of the year, you're thinking rollover, right? So you only want to focus on your budget minus the actual. Because commitments are purchase orders that have not become an actual yet, right? You just raise the purchase order with the purchasing department to buy something. The vendor hasn't delivered it yet, the payment hasn't gone through. It's not an actual expense, so it hasn't hit your actual column yet. So for rollover purposes, you want to only focus on your budget minus the actual. Budget minus actual will give you how much you have available. That's not the amount that you can roll over. It's where you stand in terms of raw dollars in your budget. Okay? So when you do that math, it's $9,600, but you can only roll over $8,000 because this is an elementary school. So when you roll over $8,000, you're going to end up losing $1,600. So the real strategy is toward the end of the year, you want to make sure that these commitments, you find out exactly what they are, number one. You tell the office manager, run me the commitments report. It's one of those reports. I want to know what this purchase order is exactly. We need to find out exactly when this vendor is going to deliver this because we need to get all of this stuff by August 31st. If we are confident that we can get it by August 31st, then at that point, this will shift and become an actual. So we won't be in real trouble. Right? So if we are not sure that we can get these items delivered, sometimes the vendor is backlogged or other things are happening because these vendors don't only service our board, right? They service everybody else. So we want to make sure that if this is something that we can cancel maybe and spend the money on something else, we should be doing that. Right? So if we're not sure we're going to get this, we're kind of at the point where, we are at risk of losing the money. Okay? I don't mean to frighten you, but this is...
That's why it's good to follow your year-end numbers, right?
That's it. Exactly, and there's always constant reminders about, purchasing will even send out a memo saying, all your orders need to be in by a certain date. So that they can ensure that the vendor is able to fill the orders so that you're not in this kind of position. Okay? Now, in this case, we're seeing $4,000 as the purchase order. But sometimes you're reviewing it and you're seeing small amounts like $2, $3, $4, right? We've seen that before. And then we trace it back. It goes all the way back to 2008, 2007. Those small amounts from a long time ago, you can tell your office manager, what is this? Just clear it, cancel it. They can contact purchasing and have it cleared, right? So always pay attention to the commitments. They don't always appear as big dollars. They could be small dollars, but again, these are things that are deducting from your rollover amount and are kind of unnecessary. Is this clear? Yeah.
I don't know if you're gonna answer this later on, but so if I run this administrative summary report at the end of the month and I want to see what's been actually spent, what's available left, how do I know there's not loose ends still floating about, that there's things sitting on a P card, or are you going to get to that, or I'll wait for that?
Well, no, I wasn't going to get to that, but so purchases on a P card are downloaded to the budget. I think it's on the 22nd, I think. So once the 22nd of the month hits, everything on that P card is charged to the budget.
What might not be on there? Is everything always on there if I'm looking at it at the end of the month?
Okay, so what might not be on there are things like computers, right? So things like Apple, for example, we raise purchase orders, but they're not here. They don't go through our PO system within the board.
It's CompuGen.
CompuGen? But even Apple. I don't feel like Apple shows up here, but CompuGen. So these are off-book type of purchases. The office manager, some of them, many of them, keep a separate, records of what hasn't hit the budget, but they know that they've placed the order. So those are the types of things that could be happening outside.
And once the spending is complete and we receive the product, they would take those numbers and plug them into
Yeah, so once the vendor delivers the item, if it's a board vendor, which it should be, they issue the invoice to the accounting department. So the school's responsibility once you get the item is the office manager goes into the system and physically clicks received. And that kind of triggers a transaction in the system that then lets accounting know to make the payment
Okay.
to the vendor, right? And at that point, it goes into your actual column.
So anything spent on P card, petty cash, or invoice entry would pretty much show up as soon as the office manager plugs it in.
Yes. So invoice entry is as soon as, they send the paper, the edit list, you sign it, they send it to accounting, as long as it's within the deadlines that they set, right? At year end, there's all these dates that they have to be aware of, right? Invoice entries have to be in by a certain time, etc. So once those are in, it makes it into the report.
And so there was a good question there about petty cash.
Yes.
And I'd like to point out, and we might get to this later in
We
one of
are
the
getting to
activities.
it, yeah.
Petty cash is a little bit of a nuanced activity in that you have to request a reimbursement for petty cash before it shows up in the actual columns here.
That's right.
So generally, as a best practice, we recommend, if possible, using a P card instead of petty cash. You can pay for items less than $200 with petty cash or a P card, and if you have that option, use the P card
That's
because
right.
that'll show up every month on the 22nd automatically.
Yes.
Okay, so it's
Yeah, and that's a good question, because we're getting to petty cash with the whole kind of updated process that we have going on now, but we'll get to that. You had another question?
I was thinking about how to word it. Okay, so I have an office manager who I find is very diligent and,
Okay.
and on the ball. I've worked with office managers where there's something in petty cash and the check comes the next day, so I know that it's coming off the books. And then I have some where it's been 2 months since I've seen a check, and you kind of get busy and caught up. When that happens, does that mean things are lagging behind and it's not going to be showing up on the?
Yeah, so like what Noreen was saying, like the petty cash only hits your budget when a replenishment is done and sent to accounting.
Okay.
So if you are, now, as you're signing checks, because every check from petty cash, you would be signing it anyway. So at some point, you will recognize that you've signed a number of checks, and how come I'm not seeing a reimbursement, right? A reimbursement request, that is. So if that is the case, you can ask the office manager. Some of them do it, once a month. But it again depends on how frequently petty cash is being used at the school, right? So some do it more than once a month, some do it every other month, because petty cash is not really the mode. Many schools prefer to use P cards.
Because it's quick and
Because it's quick,
and it's organized.
right?
Okay.
Exactly, all of those things. But if you're signing a lot of petty cash checks, remember there is a limit, right, to the petty cash. Elementary schools is $2,000. So if you're signing a lot of checks and you're not finding that the office manager has submitted a replenishment, and you will know that because it will come to you to approve. If that is not happening, then there's risk of course, going into overdraft in the bank account. So you want to kind of ask the office manager, look, are we submitting a replenishment? What's going on? But until that replenishment is done, the expense does not hit the board budget. Is that helping anyone? Okay, good. All right, so we established that in terms of the rollover calculation, we are at $9,600. The limit is $8,000, so this school is at risk of losing $1,600, which is not ideal, right? Okay, so what does the balance in the school's 859 account mean?
The school owes the board $180.
I like the way you're thinking, that's the right answer. So basically, the school is in debt. The school owes the board office $180, but the right answer is the school has to write a check from not the board account, not from petty cash. The school will have to write a check from the school generated funds account. So the 859 is kind of like an intercompany account, if you will. It's this account between the school and the board office. So whatever we charge to this account, we are intending to pay off from school-generated funds. And the 859 will be covered in detail in the next lead session on December the 10th. So at that point, you kind of get a better understanding of what it is. But suffice it to say that it will, the school owes $180, and before you sign a check though, to say pay the board $180,000, I'm always talking thousands, $180, you should ask the office manager for a detail. because you want to know what is it that we owe for, right? So they run you a transaction detail for the 859 account so that you know exactly what it could be permits, it could be supply teacher coverage for a day for some athletic event, it could be a number of things. So, but you want to know what it is so that when you're signing the check, you're confident that this is right? So the short answer is we owe, and the payment will come from school-generated funds. Okay, so this gentleman was mentioning the detail. So this is the other report. So far we've talked about the budget transfer report and the admin summary report. And we're saying the admin summary report is something that you should be looking at. The budget transfer and the budget transaction report, you could maybe skip a month if you will. But the budget transaction report goes into more detail at the transaction level. So say you're looking at your admin summary report, and Joanne noticed that her lunchroom supervision budget was overspent. You're curious, how come? What is going on? You can ask the office staff to run you a detail of that department, right? So at the beginning of the month for elementary schools, it may be easy to just run the entire report for you to review, but, as the months go by up to June, the report can get very thick, right? So, and that can be intimidating when you come in one morning and you see a stack of reports on your desk, and you're like, yeah. So what we generally say then is, as you review the admin summary report, if there's something that you want to kind of zero in on, a department that's overspent or something that is piquing your interest, you can ask the office staff to run you a detail of that specific department to limit the number of pages that they're printing, right? So this is what you will find is at the transaction level, and it has the departments here. Right? It's the same kind of information. You can trace it back to the budget, to the admin summary report, in that here we have the library classroom department 016. If you look at your admin summary report, you will find the same budget information, 4750. So this is kind of just a further drill down, right? Like it's kind of taking it one step further in terms of the transactions, okay? Now, this may come in handy when, sometimes we find that when principals move to other schools, maybe their cell phone is still kind of hitting the previous school's budgets, and you won't know that until you look at this report, because this is the transaction detail. You won't find it in the admin summary, that level of detail, but, that's something to look out for. Mm-hmm.
In the case of acting administrators that are in a different school with their actual position for that different school, how does that work?
Sorry, in the case of what?
So like if I'm an acting principal at a different school, and my actual position is with my original school, so where should my cell phone charge be taken out?
So you're acting? I'm not sure.
You're acting at one school, but your initial position is at another school.
Mm-hmm.
We can look into that to give you a firm answer. I mean, my initial feeling would be with support of the school you're currently at, right? So all expenses would be at the school you're currently at.
Is that what's happening? Is that your expenses now are hitting the current year, the current school's
No,
budget?
I have to fill in.
Okay.
I can just confirm that last year when I was acting principal,
Okay.
my cell phone bill went to where I was vice principal.
Oh.
But was the more informed? Because I think there is.
Well, even though my Vista changed for that period of time.
Yes. Now, part of the resources that we have in your packet is a checklist of things that principals that are moving from place to place need to be looking for, right? And one of them is around cell phones, right? So I think it's more the principal's responsibility if you're moving to do what's necessary.
That probably did, and I was only there for like 4 months.
Yes.
So I don't think it
So then if you're at a school as an acting principal and the principal that's off is off, their phone is still active, it's on hold, I guess, but it's still active, so out of the acting school's principal's budget, we're technically perhaps paying for both.
Right.
Is there a way to connect that to Vista, so it's an automatic?
I'm not sure, I'm not a Vista expert. I just know that we have a checklist that says, you know, if you're kind of moving, check for these things. And I'm sure it's a great idea to kind of do it, but what I've heard is that it's not hard to get it done, to get it changed. I think you contact somebody and maybe I think it's purchasing or something, and they do whatever to change the GL code behind the scenes, right? So it's not that difficult to do.
This is a nod to the office managers. My experience has been, prior to going to the new place, the receiving OM talks to the sending OM and gets that stuff switched.
Right. There you go. Yeah, many office managers are diligent that way. They kind of, talk to each other and they make the arrangements. But, as you're reviewing, if that hasn't happened and you notice something odd, then it should be corrected.
So in the agreement that we signed for our cell phones, it's our responsibility to submit the change of location form prior to wherever we're going, regardless of whether or not you're acting or not. It is up to us to submit the form to say, we're now going into this position at this school, this is the account code. If the office managers are doing that for you, that's great, but in the end, it does fall on us to do that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's a very good point.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes back to finances and responsibility, right? At the end of the day, the office managers, OMs, they're kind of closely involved in it. That's their day-to-day.
Yeah.
But again, it is the principal's responsibility to ensure that what's going through the budget, what's getting charged,
Is
makes
appropriate.
sense and it's appropriate.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right?
There's also an additional invoice that we receive for the cellular device as well. Right, there's an additional invoice, you guys get that invoice as well? It's a summary of your charges or whatever. That's a monthly invoice that comes in.
Right.
But it should indicate exactly what you're saying, what site that you are.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully the activity was helpful in kind of getting you to see what reports that we want you to look at and the pieces of information that you should focus on as you review the reports. But I think it was Natalie that was saying at the beginning how finance can be overwhelming. So our intention today was not to overwhelm you. We were just trying to give you information, but I think also that what we are hoping that you take out of this is information, of course, but that you can reach us, right? The finance board officers, we are here to support you. Our focus has shifted from supporting the office staff, which is what we were doing for a long time, bringing them up to speed, etc., training them on the school cash system. But our mandate has always been to support school administrators and superintendents, and so that's kind of what we are now trying to do, actively so. So, reach out to us. If you haven't had any meeting with your finance support officer, please reach out to her, and we will come out and meet with you, go over any kind of, planning strategies, things like that. So that's kind of what we're hoping for. All right, so we will then go to petty cash. Jenny showed us a cycle when she was speaking to us earlier about the cycle of petty cash, how it all works, right? So petty cash is, again, one way that we spend the board budget. And elementary schools have a float of $2,000, and it is intended to help schools make purchases of low dollar value items, tendered and untendered, under $200. So you will find that maybe your teachers or staff at the school, they quickly run out and buy something and they come for reimbursement. And that's what petty cash is intended for, under $200. So as we write checks and reimburse our staff for out-of-pocket expenses, the bank account starts to diminish, right? So we can't write checks eternally without replenishing. So, and that's where the replenishment process comes through. I think the gentleman over there was mentioning, he was asking how the petty cash expense gets to the budget, and it only happens when we do a replenishment. So we write a lot of checks with the right backup, detailed receipts that support the expense to reimburse our teachers, our staff, and then the office manager will accumulate all of those invoices. You as the administrators, you've signed and approved the checks, and so they will have the receipts that support the checks that they've issued, and they will run a report called the GL reimbursement report in school cash and attach all of the backup. And they come to you, principal, and they say, this is our GL reimbursement request. We want to send this to accounting, and we hope that accounting will reimburse us for these number of checks, the total number that we've written out. And accounting will receive it. You will sign it off and say, yes, I agree. Yeah, we need to get reimbursed. Then they send it to accounting. Accounting looks at it and says, yeah, this is correct. This makes complete sense. They process it in FIS, and they do a direct deposit back to the petty cash bank account. So now we're up to our float again. And so the cycle continues. We write more checks, we replenish. We write more checks, and we replenish. Now, we updated the petty cash process, and I think the principals were copied on that email. And so schools that traditionally had not balanced their float, right? So expenses from a long time ago, they never claimed it back, they were always out of balance, etc. What we thought was a good way to start the year was to top up everybody to the right float. Let's start even. Secondary schools were topped up to 4,000. Those that were not balanced were topped up. Elementary schools were topped up to the $2,000 float. And so we said, now that everybody is balanced, the school should then be able to maintain this float going forward, right? So it's no longer an excuse if you're not balanced. And the additional control is accounting will not process any reimbursement to the schools if they are out of balance. Because now everybody is in balance, nobody can claim, look, I came to the school and when I got here, we were not balanced, right? And we've kind of just continued. Now everybody is up to the float, and then it should be maintained going forward. So now as a principal, because you were copied on that email, you know that accounting will not reimburse any expenses or requests for reimbursements that are not balanced. So if you get a replenishment request and you see that there is a difference, you tell the office manager, I was on that email, please explain this difference to me, because I know they're not going to reimburse it, okay? All right, so we have a small activity. Because instead of me just talking and talking, I think an activity is a good way for you to see exactly what it is that we're emphasizing. So the scenario here is that the office manager brings to you a GL reimbursement request for petty cash. And they say to you, principal, this is the request that we want to submit to accounting. So you as an administrator, the question is, what will you focus on in this report? What is it that you should be looking at? What do you think you should focus on? And the shaded area or the highlighted portion of that report, what does it mean? What do you think it means? So let's take maybe 5 minutes, think on it. Do you just say yes, sign, send it? Or do you think you should look at some things? And if you think you do need to look at some things, what are you looking at? So the box in the top right corner of the report is what we mean. All right, so let's work on this together, right? So Kim has the answer.
No, I don't know if it's the right answer, but
Yeah.
I'm looking at the line items,
Yes.
and I'm wondering what a September service charge for $6 was.
Okay, so that's a question that you have, all right. What else? So what does the highlighted box mean was the first question, and which areas of the form will you focus on?
So let's start from the highlighted portion of this report.
Okay, so the highlighted portion is essentially your normal balance, whatever you've spent so far and how much you want back.
Okay.
Top up.
So has everybody seen this report before? Have you been presented with this report to sign before? Never? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, right? Now, this goes back to what you were asking, right? So if you were a school that uses a lot of petty cash, and by that I mean you're issuing a lot of checks to reimburse staff from petty cash for under $200, and you have not seen this report before, you should be asking your office staff to run it for you. Because at some point, if we are using a lot of petty cash and not replenishing, we are going to be in an overdraft situation, right? So this is something that you should want to see at least once a month if petty cash is something that you're using. Now, this is just one tool, right, of spending the board budget. Many schools prefer to use P cards to eliminate all of these back and forth, accounting, this and that and the other thing, right? And so we will encourage you to use P cards. However, this is just one other method of accessing, spending your board budget. Okay, so find out if you're using a lot of petty cash at your school, and if you have not seen this report, ask them. Tell them I went to LEAD today and they said I should have a GL reimbursement report. Where is ours, right? So, and they will run you the report for you to see.
Should we, as a school, choose not to use petty cash and go through P-card system only, is it our responsibility to move that money somewhere? Or?
No.
Okay.
No. You know, moving it is just there for you to use, but if you're not using it, then you're not using it. You're not moving it anywhere.
It's still accounted for in our...
Yes, it remains in the bank account. It's not untouched. Okay? It's a convenience thing, right? All right, so the question is, Kim, I think you were right when you said that, you know, it's kind of telling us what our float is and how much we're asking for back. But let's take it one step at a time. At the very top, we see $2,000. Does everybody see that? Okay, and so what this is telling us is that that is the float. This is an elementary school. Every elementary school has a float, a petty cash float of $2,000. And that's what we should be balancing to.
And it's always separate from the budget.
Yes, but it is replenished from the board budget. That's correct. So the very top, it's telling us is $2,000. The next number, $369.89, is telling us what?
The expenses, the checks that you've written.
Exactly, the total expense that we're asking the board to reimburse us for. That's what that number means, okay? And it should tie to the last page of the report. The overall total should be the same as what is on the first page. So this is the total number of checks that we've written. We're asking the board office, give us the money back. 1630.82 is just how much money we have available from the float. Simple math, right? $2,000 is our float. We've deducted $369.18. We should have on hand $1630.82. Okay? Is everybody understanding this? Yes. Okay. All right, so as a principal then, you recognize what that box is telling you. They've given you this report. You look at all the backup because it has to have backup. We're sending this to accounting, so accounting needs the backup, whether it's the receipts, the check stubs, proof that these are expenses that the school has incurred, okay? The other thing that you should be focusing on, which is really the subject of our update with the petty cash exercise that we just did, is we want the difference to always be zero. And what that means is that you are completely balanced to the float. There is no difference, okay? And this is where accounting will stop any batches that you send to them for reimbursement that have a difference, if it's not explained fully, And the only acceptable explanation is that it is a batch or the last replenishment that you sent in that may not have come in yet. Okay? So if there is a difference there, so say it's $20 of a difference, and your office staff brings this report to you, you see a difference there, you say to her, what is this difference? And she says to you, oh, we just sent in a previous one for $20 that we haven't gotten back yet. That would be an acceptable explanation from accounting's point of view. Because once we get that $20 back, we will be balanced back to the float. But say it's a random number and she can't explain it. She says, oh, I'm out of balance, I'm not really sure why. Accounting will not reimburse that if this is not fully explained. So at that point, you tell her, please investigate, because as of the beginning of November, we were completely balanced. Finance balanced everybody. You shouldn't be now out of balance to the float. Please investigate and make sure that this number makes sense before we send it into accounting.
Would there be an issue where you would be out of balance because a staff member hasn't cashed the check yet?
No.
So that would just be that would just be with the our bank accounts.
Yeah, that is more of a bank reconciliation issue, right? So if you issue a check, it's still a deduction from your records, right? And so we should still be able to claim it. Now, whether or not they cash the check or not is a separate thing, right?
I'm not sure if this is the right question to ask, but sometimes when staff buy things that are not from an approved vendor, or they should be buying it from somewhere else, and it's not an eligible expense, can you talk to us about how to handle that?
Yes, so if they've incurred an expense that is not appropriate, right? You are not going to reimburse them for that to begin with, right? So there will be no issue. They buy something that's not authorized, you're not gonna sign a check that's reimbursing them for something. But say they buy something, you think it's okay, but they don't submit the right receipt. So say they incur an expense, they give you they submit a credit card slip that's not detailed, but they explain to you, I just went down to the dollar store and bought pencils, right? That wouldn't be acceptable because we have a board vendor for that, but that's a separate thing. So, you kind of say, okay, this is approved. The office manager takes that credit card slip and sends it to accounting. Accounting is gonna say, this is not the right backup. I don't know what was bought. We need an itemized receipt so that we know exactly what was purchased. So in that case, they may not reimburse for that particular expense. They will disallow it, but that doesn't mean you can't resubmit it. With the right expense, with the right backup, you can resubmit it to get reimbursed if it is an approved expense. So if the issue is more of a backup problem, like you don't have the right paperwork, but the expense itself is right, accounting will want the backup to be right. So they will disallow it, but give you an opportunity to obtain the right receipt. So the teacher can go to the vendor, get the right receipt, and then resubmit. The office can resubmit. But if it's a completely disallowed expense that we have somehow reimbursed the teacher for, then accounting will not reimburse you. You will be out of the float. The teacher will have to reimburse the school, right? Is that making sense? Okay, so the gist of all of this, from an admin standpoint, is look at the difference when you're looking at this reimbursement request. If there is a difference, tell the office manager to explain it, okay? And the explanation should make sense. So if they show you that it's a previous reimbursement that we're still waiting for from accounting, then that would be acceptable. You can go ahead and sign the report at the top. You've reviewed the backup, it makes sense, right? And then it goes forward. So that's the gist of this report. And then once it's sent to accounting, they process it in FIS and then they charge it to your budget, and that's when it becomes an actual expense charged to the board budget. Is that clear? So basically, we're discouraging you from petty cash. P cards. P cards is always easier and neater and cleaner, right? So this is just a convenience by the side, just in case there is a need to reimburse. All right, so the last section of the checklist that concerns the board budget is the P card section. Right, so Jenny told us about the 4 different kinds of P cards that we have. We have the principal's card, which is in your name, okay? It's in your name, it's a physical card. We have the shared card as well, that is a physical card. It requires no signature, so it should be guarded and safeguarded and locked up and all of that. Then we have the ghost cards, okay? So everybody's familiar with the P cards, right? Is there anybody that doesn't know what the P card is, has never seen it at this school? No? Okay. So the ghost card is not a physical card. We have 2 kinds. One is for the books, devoted to books and books alone. Why do we have one that's devoted to books and books alone? So that what?
You get to take that.
Right, so you get the tax rebate. So for books, we pay 5% GST. And so it's important that we use the right card so that we get exactly the right rebate. If we make a mistake and kind of use the wrong card, we're going to get the wrong rebate back. Okay? So, you had a question?
So if you're making invoice for books, do you still get the rebate or no?
Yes, if they use the right code, right? In FIS, it has to be, coded correctly to get the right rebate. Okay, so the ghost card, it has a large amount, $15,000 the limit for elementary schools, $20,000 for secondary schools. It's for online purchases. It's just a number, so it's very important. Schools ask all the time, how do we safeguard a number, right? Like it's not a physical card. You can't lock up a number in the drawer. So for Corporate Express, many schools I know just limit it to the office. They say the office is the only one that is going to be placing the order, right? So whatever order you have, there's a deadline for placing orders. All orders come in, the office kind of does the ordering. If you're comfortable giving that number to grade level heads or however else you want to manage that, you can. But just know that it's just a number. If somebody gets a hold of it, they can go shopping. And what's interesting about this, or scary I should say, is that P card purchases, once they're made, they're going through your budget, right? You can only find out about an inappropriate expense after the fact, right? So unless you're safeguarding these cards, if there's fraudulent activity, and you're not reviewing all the paperwork and backup, then it's a deduction from your board budget, whether you realize it or not. Right, so there's all kinds of safeguards around P cards. We talked about the shared P card, there's the limit. So Jenny was talking about the approvals for P cards, and this is kind of something for those of you that are facing an audit this year, that's something that they're going to be looking at, is the controls around P cards. Do you have a log? Are you using a log for the ghost cards and the shared cards? Right? Do you have a filed authorized user list? This is something that maybe many schools don't realize. It has to be a physical paper of who you have approved, you've signed it, and you tell the office to file it. These are the people that are approved to access the shared card, the ghost card, the P cards. Right? So if you don't have that, or you're not sure if you're using a log at the school, when you go back, ask your office staff, are we using logs? Can I see the logs, right? And the logs serve a very important control in this whole process, because when you kind of fill out the log, there is a limit, right? So for shared card, for example, okay, I've kind of jumped the gun here. So let's look at the monthly log. This is a principal's tool. It's on our finance website. So this is kind of like a tool for you to kind of know what P cards you've seen and approved on a monthly basis, right? So we have this, and I'll show you where it is on the effective practices page. But we have the principal's card, the ghost cards, and the shared cards, the 859 card. So you may not have an 859 card, it's not for every school, but if you do have one, this is kind of a good way to keep track of what you have seen. You're supposed to approve all of the P-card statements every month. And by approving, what you're saying is I have reviewed all the expenses and all the attachments and they are appropriate school-related expenses. So this will be assigned then to you if you miss any month. It will become immediately apparent if you're using this log. You're kind of just checking off. So if one stands out, then you're like, oh, you know, I didn't see this one, I didn't receive it. Now remember, because this is BMO, our vendor for P-cards is Bank of Montreal, that they don't send statements if there is no activity, right? So if your principal's card, you haven't used it for 1 month or whatever, you're not gonna get a statement with 0 transactions. They only send statements if there are transactions on the statement. So just because you don't see a check mark or something doesn't mean that, you know, you didn't get the statement. It could be that you've received it, you just haven't reviewed it, or it could be that there is no activity. All right, so this is the log that I had started discussing. All the P cards should have a dedicated log, and that's to track who is using this P card. If it's a physical card, we want to know, right? So if the teacher signs it out, and the teacher has to be on the authorized user list, if this teacher signs it out and, you know, misplaces it, at least we know who had the card last, right? Or if somebody on this list, this authorized user list, takes the card but is never bringing back the receipts. They make purchases, but there's always a problem about bringing receipts. Then as an administrator, maybe this person shouldn't be authorized to use the card. Okay, maybe we should review and say, okay, you know what? Whatever you need, we will order it for you. We don't need you to have access to the card, okay? So we track the limit. In this case, we're dealing with a shared card that has a limit of $3,000. So as they sign it out and say exactly what they're buying, we're kind of deducting it from the $3,000 so that, you know, we know where we are in terms of the limit. We don't want any teacher going out there and being embarrassed, the card is declined or whatever. We don't want that, right? And the other thing too, we want to know if they're bringing back the right receipts. So it's easy to tell once they come back and they sign the card back in. You say, well, did you buy anything? And they say, yes, I bought, you know, pencils. And you say, well, where is the receipt? And they give you a credit card slip. You're going to say right away, no, we need the itemized receipt. That's what we need. So it serves a number of purposes, and audit will look for this. Right? So if this is not a file, you'll get written up for not having a log.
What happens if they lose the receipt? Then what are you doing?
So they can do a number of things. One, they can go back to the vendor and ask for a copy of it. Number two, we have a missing receipts form, which is not something we advertise, but it's there. So if in the event that, you know, things happen, a receipt is, you know, put in the laundry and, you know, destroyed, there is provision for that. They fill in this receipt, missing receipt form, and you authorize it, and that becomes the backup. But we don't want a situation where it's just now, like, we make no effort to get the original, we're just kind of filling in this missing receipt form. So it's there as a solution to that kind of problem, but that's not the ideal scenario. Okay, so BMO statements. So you are going to receive statements for the ghost cards, both the ghost and the general. You are going to receive statements for the P card, shared P card. And so when you get that, what do you do with it? You're going to review it, right? So you will review the transactions, make sure that they make sense, that the backup is complete and attached. So if you see a purchase that doesn't look familiar, then you can ask more questions. You say to the office manager, I don't know what this is. Can you do more investigation? They will then go to the, you know, teacher or whoever placed the order to get more details. So please make sure that you're reviewing, because as I said, every expense on the P card is gonna be charged to your board budget, whether it's a legitimate expense or not. So this is where you then find out whether these things are appropriate school-related expenses or not, okay? So you're doing your review for reasonableness, for the appropriate backup, etc.
And the receipts are usually behind it.
That's correct.
Attached, so you can be able to go item by item.
Exactly, and you know, gathering of the receipts is not the administrator's responsibility, right? So the person that's the custodian of the card is usually in the office, right? So they are the ones that administer the log, they make sure that the receipts are right. So when it comes to you, it should all be complete.
Because if there's no receipt when it goes to board, they'll.
Yeah, so it's not going to the board, so this,
Sorry.
yeah, so the P card expenses are not coming here for additional review, right? School-related expenses, you are the one that has the oversight over it. But the auditor can come in and decide to look at it and see that, you know, check if it's reasonable, if it's appropriate. There's random audits too that happen here at the board. Some schools have gotten calls to say, look, we're reviewing your P cards from last year. Can you please explain these things?
And yeah, just to add to that, those random audits are outside of an formal internal audit.
That's
so
right.
Even if you're not in scope for an internal audit this year, you could still be picked for a random audit.
That's it.
Card.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the signature?
Yes,
Are you gonna talk about
I
that?
will.
Okay, then I'll leave it. Thank you.
So the next, so you review the transactions on this statement, you make sure that they're appropriate, the right backup is attached, you ask questions as necessary. Then further at the bottom is where you will see the kind of P card that you're even looking at, right? It will tell you it's the shared card or the ghost bulks or the general ghost. And it will tell you the account code that it's being charged to. So in this case, it's going to 330 and the other numbers, and that's kind of where you can trace it if you want to the budget transaction report that we talked about earlier. So that's additional information, and then the signatures. So all the P card statements will be approved by you, the principal. And when you're approving, what you're essentially saying is these are appropriate expenses related to school, and I have looked at the backup, okay? If it is your own P card as an administrator, you'll have to send that to the superintendent to get that approved, because you can't approve your own expense, right? So it's one level up approval process here at Peel. Does that answer your question?
It does, it's just that for different positions that I've been with the board, you know, I was told that we sign on that first signature, and then there should be, if we place a line, truth be told, and on the other side, it's kind of like how you created this box, and that's where the superintendent will sign. Is that, I'm just asking.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of less fussed about where the superintendent signs. Like, I think you sign your own, you can kind of make a note on the statement, maybe around here, that, you know, you've kind of looked at it, this is really your statement or whatever, but the approval, I think, is more of a superintendent thing. So whether you kind of put your, like, draw a line, your signature versus the superintendent's signature.
Well, we should sign it as well?
You could.
Oh, you could?
You could. I think by you giving the superintendent your statement and the backup, you're basically telling the superintendent that these are your expenses. So whether or not you sign it, I think, is less important. It's the superintendent's approval of your statement that's important, right? So the superintendent signs it, and then you're good to go. Is this clear? Helping anybody? All right. Whew, activity, I know. Let's just answer a few questions, right? It's not difficult, I promise. So the phys ed teacher wants to purchase some new gym equipment totaling $4,200. He is asked to use the P card to make the purchase. What are you going to tell this teacher? No? What's the right answer? We're not doing gym anymore?
Get out.
That's a purchase order.
So is it okay to say, you know what, go to the vendor, tell the vendor to divide up this invoice into 100 places, invoice us 42 times, and then we're going to pay it by petty cash? No?
Well, I guess it can be done, but we should not be doing that, that's not.
I didn't hear that. Okay, so no, that's not what we want. We don't want them dividing up invoices. What we want is what? Purchase order, exactly. Go through that whole process that Jenny talked about, because it's over $4,000, and the board policy is anything over $4,000, we raise a purchase order. So that's what we're gonna tell them.
But this is in addition to what we've already provided them, part of the budget, correct? Or is that that's using his budget?
That's now a good question. Gym equipment, it could be his budget. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. It's still coming out of the 005, yes. But that's a good question though, because it could be that it's coming out of their particular department, if they have a department for phys ed or something that you've given them. So maybe in your planning with them beforehand, they said they wanted to buy gym equipment. And based on that, you allocated more money to them based on that. You've given them $16,000 as opposed to $8,000 last year, because you know that they're gonna be ordering this thing. So in that case, it could come out of that particular department. But say it's something that, wasn't planned for, and you have that holdback that Jenny was talking about from rollover from last year for unexpected expenses. It could then come out of a different budget. But the important thing is, at the end of the day, is coming out of your 005, your instructional supplies. Okay, so does this help? So we know that it's purchase orders. Okay, so what if a different scenario? They want to order books, it's $3,500. They want the shared P card. Is that something we can do? What's the right answer? I hear a different answer. Okay. So because we are buying books, we are going to suggest to them that they need to use the Ghost Books card. And it's so critical to do that because of the rebate, the tax rebate, exactly. So that's our answer. The right answer is we're going to use the Ghost Books. Okay, different scenario. It's now classroom supplies. They want the shared card.
Depends on if they're individual purchases, but if it's for all the grade 3 classes and it's through a vendor, then they would do the purchase. Then it would go through there if it was enough. Is it 3? Are you doing it for 3 separate?
So they're making a big order of $3,500 for classroom supplies. First of all, can they use the shared card?
No.
Yes?
Past the limit. Isn't it past the limit?
Yeah, it's past the limit, because the limit is $3,000, so we can't even do that. So that rules that out.
But if it was 3,000, we could have used it.
If they use it, then there's no P-card activity for that whole month, which we don't want to handicap the school that way. So what's the right answer?
Purchase order?
Purchase order? Did we say there was a limit for purchase orders? A minimum of?
Oh, it's a minimum. It has a minimum.
A minimum of what? What's the purchase order limit? The minimum. So can we do purchase order here? No. So what would be the right style? The general Ghost card. That's the same one that we use for Corporate Express. And remember, the limit is what? For elementary schools? 15,000. So it's a big limit. So it can accommodate this and other things. Is this helping?
Sorry, you're right. On another, so the only reason why you wouldn't have them use the P card is because for that month, it would be over the $2,000 amount.
3,000.
Or the $3,000
Yeah.
amount. So you would just have them do an invoice, but
You have them use the Ghost card.
because that's 15.
That's right. And remember, the Ghost card is for online purchases, which is what we're trying to do here. Okay, so let's go on to the next question. This one's important. So the school has received an invoice for catering services totaling $57.25 for a staff meeting that you, as the principal, held. How can we handle this invoice? Principal's P card. How else?
I thought it had to be because it was the most senior person.
Okay, so I like the way you're thinking. So yes, the most senior person at a meeting is supposed to incur the expense. So this is the principal's meeting for staff meeting. So yes, we're gonna use the P card, but why is that? Who does it go to after that? It goes to superintendent, but is that the only way though? No. Can we pay by petty cash? Yeah, we can. We can pay by petty cash. It's under $200. And remember, another layer of eyes are going to be looking at this when we send in the reimbursement to accounting. So it's not going to end at the school. Accounting is also going to vet this to make sure it's appropriate, right? So in both cases, somebody else other than the school is looking at this.
We were holding back on food for.
We're getting there. So yes, and the short answer is, try to schedule meetings outside of meal times, and you don't always have to do meals, but if you are gonna do it, it has to be from the board budget, and it should be reasonable.
I know Julie and I have talked about this before, that the principal can't do all the shopping, and we go to Costco a lot, for example, to buy foods, because it's cheaper than having it catered or whatever, so sometimes you eat, and you do the purchasing of this, as long as they have all the controls indicated in the food and all that.
Yeah, so that's the next piece of this answer is what else is the backup that we need? We need a list of whoever attended this meeting, right? So that's, again, something that audit has written up schools for, not having a list of who attended meetings, etc. So that's additional pieces of information that they need.
So with dinner for staff next Thursday, we have our late night call onto the staff.
Dinner for staff, sorry, what is it for?
Parent-teacher interview day.
Yes, I've seen that, as long as it's reasonable, because they're staying late, am I right? Yeah, so reasonable, defensible. Noreen was talking about transparency. If it's something that you feel that you can always kind of defend, if it's audited, there's reasons why they're staying late, it's kind of like an additional effort, extra effort, then I think it's reasonable.
And board budget.
And board budget, yes. Yeah, it's not steak and lobster, right? We're not going, it has to be reasonable. Okay, so a few reminders. So if you recall at the beginning of October, the director's office sent out finance reminders memo, right? Does everybody remember that? And I think it's part of the resources in your packet that you have. Right, and so, these questions we get all the time, and we just thought we would kind of put it forefront so that, it's something that you're thinking about, or at least remembering that food at meetings should be limited. If you're going to schedule a meeting, try to do it outside of meal times, but if it becomes absolutely necessary, make sure it's reasonable and that it's from the board budget and board budget only, okay, as opposed to school-generated funds. Instructional supplies budget, the primary purpose of that is curriculum type supplies, provisions, but it's not only for that. You can use it for extracurricular as well, but the whole point of it is to make sure that every curriculum requirement is covered, expenses, etc. We have all the tools that we need before we extend it to extracurricular spending. Social events, so retirement parties, holiday, I know Christmas is coming up, we want to kind of show appreciation to staff, all of that. We can't do that. Those are considered personal expenses, retirement parties, holiday events, those types of things. Those are personal. We should be paying for that outside of the board budget or...
I have a question regarding all of the appreciation days.
Yes.
So typically that has been something that either myself and my other partner, VPEP, whatever, have incurred.
Appreciation for who? Like recently I've started to see bus driver appreciation and things like that. Today it's me. Okay. Look, what I think is what the memo says. And what the memo says is appreciation should be only to recognize special efforts and extra efforts, okay? It makes mention of maybe staff that are staying late to do things like the school dance or whatever. I personally speaking don't feel that we should be doing appreciation for the bus drivers, etc. And I mean, they're doing a valuable service, obviously. I think we all are. But, you know, I don't feel that we should be doing it, but that's just my opinion.
Or maybe incurring additional expenses to honor it.
Yeah, or you know, we can have the kids make them a card or something where they're signing off and showing appreciation that way. But you know, I don't know that when the director's office was putting this together, they were thinking of appreciation of everybody and all that, because the amounts can start to pile up. I don't know if you want to add anything, Noreen?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do it outside of sort of the board funding or anything like that, I know that some schools have their own sort of social committee and so on.
Right.
And they would have collections for, you know, anything outside of that. Then that's a social event outside of the budget.
You're going to collect money separately.
Exactly, but then generally the memo speaks to, you know, limited and, you know, they actually specify the $25 limit.
Yeah, for tokens of appreciation for those that have done extra efforts. They talk about even a mug, you know, giving a mug or, you know, something like that. I think is what the memo is saying. Beyond that, I would not recommend it, but, you know, if you feel that strongly, talk to your superintendent and see what they feel about it, but I'm gonna stick to the memo. Right?
Just elaborate on tokens of appreciation. You have somebody who comes in and does a presentation, maybe out of board, and it was phenomenal. You have a modern learning resource teacher that comes in and provides this incredible avenue for your staff and students. That wouldn't fall into that.
Yeah, so I think that kind of came up earlier about kind of having guest speakers in to, you know, I think there's two kinds of guest speakers. One is the kind that, you know, they're expecting to be paid. It's a service that they're providing, so it's a paid service, in which case they have an invoice, right? But there is the voluntary kind that they're just coming to do it and we want to show them appreciation, in which case, you know, there is the honorarium form that we can fill out if you're wanting to kind of, you know, give them a $50, $100 honorarium for what they're doing. Then there's a whole process and a form that we follow. I think in the case of the tokens of appreciation, you know, it's more like staff that are going over and beyond, right? Like in support of extracurricular activities, that sort of thing, or the way the memo puts it, in support of school and student activities. Then we can, you know, give them a token of appreciation, but I think the memo is also very clear that it shouldn't be like the entire staff. You know, we can't have like a thank you gift at the beginning of the year, or, you know, end of year gift for everybody at the end of the year. So I think that's kind of the parameters that we're working with, right? Now, if you have exceptions or something that you wanted to do beyond that, I'm always a fan of talking to your superintendent to get clearance from there, right? Okay, so tokens of appreciation, we want to limit that to $25, again, in recognition of special efforts, over and beyond type of efforts. Okay, so resources. We are very proud of our Effective Practices website. Has everyone had the chance to go there? Yeah? Do you like it? Did you find what you were looking for easily? No? You have to search a little bit, but it's become easier. We're kind of...
How did you get there?
Yeah, so I'll show you. I'll go live. So we developed this. It's a significant upgrade from the book that we had, the Effective Practices Manual. So we've made it online where you can kind of just log in and search for things, and it just kind of appears and it's linking to different things. So I will show you how it works. So once you log in to your My Site page, if you go to departments here at the top, and scroll down, go to Finance Support Services. So from Departments, Finance Support Services, and if you click there and scroll down, there is the Effective Practices here. So if you click on there, this is our Effective Practices, and there's resources for principals over here. So if you click here, there's memos and the checklet here for principals. There is principals' roles and responsibilities, monthly checklist. If you are starting to plan for your activity school generated funds, that will be a topic for the December 10th session, but we have the financial plan here that you can access. There is the section on policies as well. So Finance Policy 1, again, concerns school generated funds, but that is the policy that governs that. You can also search, I believe, here. So if we kind of put in something like checklist, it kind of brings up checklist here. And we can kind of click and monthly. It has monthly checklist, so there is kind of some digging that has to be done, but you can search for information, I think is what we're getting at here. So the checklist that we went over with you today is over here, and this is the updated one, updated as of October 2019. So here it is. Okay, so this is what we were recommending that you look at, and all the other ones is as needed. So we are very proud of this, and it contains a lot of updated information. You can just search there. If you search and you're not finding something that you were expecting to find, you can reach out to us. It may not be there, or maybe it's very particular with the keywords that you use. So if you type in something and it's not coming up, maybe it's listed under something else, a different word. But generally, it picks up, what you're searching for. So if you haven't, looked for stuff on here, I would encourage you to do that. It's very easy to find. Yeah. Is there something else?
It's not as good as Google search.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
We're getting there. Right? It's an in-house kind of development, so we are kind of working.
Yeah, it's a good starting point to find all the policies, expense policies, and so on. You can find the policies there. Usually, the way the links work is, as you're reading through kind of an overview, if there's a specific guideline that you need to be referring to, it's linked, so you can go automatically to that guideline, read that through, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's very easy to find, and I think we're ahead of schedule. So any questions, additional concerns? I think the big takeaway is we're happy to have presented all of this, but it's a lot to take in, and, you know, to kind of digest, especially that GL reimbursement form. Many of you don't seem to have seen it before, but, you know, and the logs, that's another thing with the P cards, is all the controls around the logs and reviewing of material, all of that. You know, don't feel like you're alone. If you need support with finance, understanding it, managing it, strategizing, etc., please reach out to your finance support officer. I'm one of them. I support Michelle's superintendency and Sony Gill and Gail. So 3 of them. Julie supports. Okay, and Jenny supports. Okay, and my other colleagues, Christine supports, I think, who? Liz Cook, Dana, and someone else. But in any case, all our information is on here, all our contact information. The other thing that I wanted to kind of call your attention to are the resources in your binder, right? So it has the checklist, it has the finance memo, it has the checklist for principals that are moving schools. It has the the repairs budget memo, I think, on all the the instructional budget memo on what you can use the instructional budget for, and I think it has some other pieces of information on there. So feel free to review and reach out to us with any questions that you have. Hopefully you found this helpful. The other thing that I wanted to mention just before you leave, there is a survey on the desk. Please take a few moments to put your thoughts to paper there and tell us what you like or what you wish we would have covered more, or how we can help you better understand, you know, finances, etc., what your thoughts are. We would be happy to kind of take it all in and kind of add it to our next session. So thank you so much for coming.
So can I also add that just on your way out, if you can drop the form off on the front table. And another thing I wanted to share is consider sharing some of this information in your staff meetings, especially when you're dealing with approved vendors, right? And, you know, talk about the potential of not being reimbursed because it wasn't purchased within that, you know, so. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks again for your time, and do know that you're not alone on this journey, and we're here for you. So if we haven't reached out yet, please feel free to contact us directly, and if you're not sure about your FSOA, we can have a list.
Yeah, we do have a list here, so.
Yeah, we will have that list to you, and we can share that. But definitely, for all new principals, we will see you in the near future. And we can meet you 10 times if you'd like.
That's right.
As much as it takes for you to feel comfortable with your school finances. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming.